Hi, hello. I think we'll get started with panel 4 now, which is creative dialogue. So this is Keren, who is a second-year PhD student in creative writing at the University of Salford in the UK. She comes from Mauritius and graduated from the University of Northampton with a BA Honours in creative writing. Her research interests include deep listening, life writing, psychological realism. Her thesis is on occult current experiences of Mauritians, having interviewed 15 participants to write her first nonfiction novel, Words from World Watchers. Keren is currently building her career in writing, research and teaching at the University of Salford. Her interdisciplinary projects include post-COVID life collaboration, mental well-being of students and staff, anti-gambling harms research, and mentoring programs for graduates. So, welcome.
Okay. Good afternoon. I am Keren Poliah, and my research documents experiences in Mauritius through creative writing. So today, through practice-based research, I will present a reading of original prose, focusing on the gendered, post-colonial, and anthropomorphic elements of contemporary occult practices in Mauritius. Based on interviews with those affected by occult practices, When the Veil is Lifted is a fictionalized account of the experiences of Mauritian women, here represented as a composite character named Serade. Testing the boundaries of feminist creative nonfiction, the narrative follows Serade as her Tamil heritage informs her experience of puberty rites, marriage, and mothering. In every phase of her life, Serade is accustomed to the presence of traiteurs, who are also the sorcerers and witches of Mauritius. And she witnesses her sister being possessed and her in-laws involved in animal sacrifices. Her story is a chapter from a roman-à-clef in progress, Words from World Watchers, narrating the occult experiences of Mauritians. And thematically, the creative writing explores the invented boundaries of religion and witchcraft, the use of sacrificial animals, anthropomorphic deities, and their relationship with psychics. So the first section I'll read focuses on Serade's occult experiences at her paternal home and her father's friend, whom she calls tonton, meaning uncle. He is a traiteur. By the end of the year I became a woman, my sister fell very sick. I remember being scared that she would be taken away from me. She was only 4 years old and still hopping to kindergarten every morning. Our home at Suriname was surrounded by trees, and so was the whole village. Back in those days, and even though it was only 30 years ago, our gardens, schools, hospitals, and streets were all forestry, with majestic mango, longan, badami, fruits à pain, and coronsel trees breathing among us. At my sister's kindergarten school, there was a large fruits à pain tree, one whose finger-like branches seemed as if they were bending to pick her up whenever she had her lunch under its shade. I didn't like that tree. It gave me chills. I snatched her away from its shade when I picked her up after school. On the day that my sister fell very sick, I found it strange that she didn't hold my hand on the way back from kindergarten. She didn't hop and run at every 5 meters along the dusty street. She walked with her head bent and her small hands tucked in her skirt's pockets. I nudged her and pinched her chubby cheeks, but she kept her eyes on the dry yellow land until we reached home. Once home, she threw herself in our mother's arms, flailed her legs violently, and started crying as if someone was torturing her by removing her toenails one by one with a sharp tongue. And every night, at exactly midnight, she cried and wailed like that for a week. At first, she started sobbing, and then the screaming followed in those earlier hours before dawn. Her agonizing screams scared us all, and her cries sounded like someone whose intestines were being pulled out the throat. Among her sobs, She was whispering, serpent piqué, serpent piqué, serpent piqué. Her warm tears stained my mother's long skirt until the rooster sang at 4. After a week of figuring out what was wrong and why my sister was seeing snakes we couldn't see, my father spoke to Tonton, who said, "Be capable in pass d'un mauvais. Don't worry, I'll drop by tonight." When he came, Tonton only had to step in the same room as my sister to know exactly what was wrong. He looked at her with his blank eyes like he was staring into the empty space between him and my sister, which, to him, seemed filled by something that had all his attention. He listened even though no one was speaking, and he gave a slight nod to his right. Then he asked my mother to get him a glass of white rum, which he gulped. "What did you give her in her bread to school that day she fell sick?" he asked. "Sardine," replied my father. "Don't you know not to give children sardine in their bread because they walk around with their bread everywhere when they eat?" Tonton nodded his head in disbelief that my father had allowed something so ridiculous to happen. Tonton said that there is a tree near my sister's school, the same witchy fruit à pain tree I disliked, that is inhabited by spirits. "Rêvez d'encore un là-dedans." He gestured at his empty glass, which my mother refilled. He gulped the rum and said, "Don't ever give your child sardine to eat anywhere. After all, we use that for prayer offerings." My parents understood what I didn't, that they had just offered their youngest daughter to spirits living in a tree. Since there was no proper binding ritual, the spirits were hovering above my sister, haunting her soul into giving up her tiny body. "J'ai fait la prière grand du monde là-bas," he added, knowing that traiteurs occasionally summoned and prayed to the guardians in that tree. Even my parents offered sardine to our grand timoun, also known as gardien la cour, meaning guardian of our land. It was an annual ritual during which father lit a candle, sliced a lemon in two, poured a glass of white rum, and left a freshly baked round pain maison with sardine in the corner of our yard. "Rêvez encore un là-dedans," said Tonton. He swallowed his drink and started praying. We call this ritual faire un pas, which translates to do a pass and holds no meaning to non-native speakers. To us, it is the art of traiteurs when they take a knife, gloves, and a sewing needle to draw the shape of the Christian cross on their client. Tonton made the sign of the cross on my sister using each of these ingredients. He repeated the process 3 times in front, back, and on either sides while reciting some incantations. He took a necklace with a wooden cross hanging from it and put it around her neck. He said that the cross was blessed with holy water and prayers. He strictly instructed my parents not to remove this necklace from her until he returned. He didn't say when he was coming back, and he left after downing another glass. But that same night, my sister slept peacefully until morning. About a week later, when my sister was bathing under the coronsel, my mother removed the necklace and hung it on a branch. She forgot about the necklace until midnight, when my sister started crying and screaming like she did before. "Serpent-là, le molipied, look at it here, it's on my hand, get it off, get it off." She closed her eyes and shouted for my mother to make all the snakes go away. I stayed outside the room, occasionally glancing at the floor in fear of seeing a snake. I shivered and almost staggered after being shocked by my own long wispy curl dangling over my shoulder. After finding the necklace, father brought it and made my sister wear it, but nothing happened. The next day, Tonton had to come back to whisper his incantations and tie the necklace to her. The necklace with the wooden cross remained a part of my sister's body for weeks. When Tonton returned to seal his final rituals, he looked at my sister and smiled gently. We all remained in silence while Tonton nodded to his right side, listened attentively, provided an indiscernible answer to someone only he could talk to, and then asked my mother for his usual glass of rum. After he had drank, prayed, and removed the necklace himself, my sister never suffered from seeing the snakes. Being only 4, she even quickly forgot about the whole terrifying experience, but I didn't. And since then, I noticed all the times Tonton whispered, nodded, smiled, and leaned towards his right. In my mind, I treated Tonton like he was 2 persons, not 1. Since he was always drinking for 2 and claimed to be constantly accompanied, I wondered about his daily life, including taking a shower, going to the toilet, having sex with his wife. I never met his wife, but I wondered how she felt. Where was the Grande Moon during those moments she was intimate with her husband? Did Tonton ask it to leave for a few hours sometimes? I was too shy to ask, so I only observed. During the days Tonton fare and pass for his clients and gulped their rum, he was never drunk. But when he rejoiced during a festive occasion, drank whiskey and had a good laugh, he could barely hold himself and fell in our garden on his way out. Now on to the last extract of this chapter. Serade is married and spends her first day at her in-laws, only to find that they want her to engage in their rituals. Serade Beti, we're going to introduce you to our Grande Moon. They invited me to follow them. I looked around for my husband and sensing my unease, my mother-in-law added, "He's not here. He's out with his friends." My father-in-law presented the guardian la cour and said, "You're lucky you're getting to see our annual prayer to them today." He placed one clay diya on the first rock, filled it with ghee, and dipped in a cotton wick. "We pray them to guard our house, protect our family, and prevent anything bad from entering our yard." He drowned the cotton wick floating in the ghee and lit its tip, which was left hanging over the diya's lips. He repeated the process on all rocks and then turned to his wife for her to give him 4 glasses of rum. Traiteurs use those same guardians to harm and carry their evil deeds. But in our yard, those saints are ours. They protect us, he said. He placed the glasses on the rocks and continued, "We need to treat the guardians well, as per their personalities and taste." He picked the gunny bag at his feet and kicked the snail which had started its climb towards the handle. He removed a lemon from the bag and sliced it in half. "We slice a lemon instead of a chicken," he said while placing the halves on the 3rd rock. He took a round parmesan with sardine, unwrapped it from its large tissue paper, and placed it in the middle of the banana leaf. He made a slight nod to his wife, and she left towards the backyard. He removed another lemon from the bag and placed it in one piece on the 2nd rock while saying, "We put a whole lemon where a chicken doesn't need to be sliced, but is simply offered without pouring blood." Then he took a round parmesan with dried salted cod and arranged it like on the previous rock. We remained in an awkward silence which probably lasted for 2 minutes. The silence underlined the emptiness in my chest, and I thought of how I wanted to run away from this dark alley. The rays of the sun shone in the blue bucket a few meters away from me. The wrinkles on the water's smooth surface let my thoughts drift to the ocean of Suriname behind my parents' house. I stepped into the light closer to the bucket and faced the front yard so that my father-in-law couldn't see the tear shining in the corner of my eye. I had thought the sun would burn my bare feet and skin, but its warmth was surprisingly reassuring. The concrete floor was as warm as my mother's kitchen. "Bring the bucket here, Betty," said my mother-in-law. Startled by her squeaky voice, I clumsily picked up the heavy bucket, spilled some water on the way, and then decided to simply drag the vessel in the alley's shade. When I faced my in-laws, I was shocked in a very unsettling way. There was a black rooster in my father-in-law's hens. It was a jet black rooster, one of the fattest chickens I had ever seen, with not an iota of white, yellow, brown, or any color on it. My mother-in-law took the bucket from me and splashed the cold water on the roots of her papaya tree. She proceeded to fill the bucket with boiling water from a marmite. I shivered when my father-in-law took the rooster by its skinny legs and turned it upside down. The animal growled and cawed as loudly as it could, and my mother-in-law said, "Let's get this over with quickly." She held its neck and wings down. My father-in-law tied thin jute ropes around the rooster's wriggling feathery body so tightly that they prevented its wings from flapping. My eyes met the animal's eye during that process, and I thought I saw tears, fear, and a reflection of the clouds in them. My father-in-law dipped the animal headfirst in the boiling water and waited until all its contortions stopped. It was over in less than a minute, but time had never seemed to move too slowly, so slowly for me. I covered my mouth to prevent my screams and lunch from gushing out. He pulled the wet dead chicken out, letting it hang over the bucket for water to drip back in. The glossy black feathers were lying all over the place and the black skin hung limply. I saw the animal's bulging eye, now forcefully closed by swollen skin and steam wafting out. "Kateri, she is a fearful one, isn't she?" said my father-in-law, ready to continue his lecture. But my legs were trembling and I couldn't hear his voice anymore. There was this ringing noise in my ears. The world was moving even though I was still, and I started running. I ran on the swirling pavement and up the stairs, which seemed like they were floating away from me. I ran in the corridor and tried to avoid the walls which were crashing on me. I heard my mother-in-law's voice from a distant tunnel, but I wanted to be far from her. I struggled to walk towards my husband's room, holding onto the same walls I thought were falling. In reality, I could get no further than the house's front door. I sat on the cold marble floor, closed my eyes, and let my head hang out of my veil wherever gravity pulled it. When I woke up in my husband's bed, I heard my mother-in-law tell my husband that I am too skinny and should be fed better to avoid heat stroke. Over the month, I accepted my in-laws and their religious ways. Thank you very much. The rituals mentioned in this chapter are for deities from Tamil Nadu, India. They are worshipped as guardian deities in my country, Mauritius. And this chapter specifically mentions Munishwaran, Madurai Viran, Periyachi Amma, and Kateri. This is just to provide context for anyone who wants to look or research or who already recognizes them. So thank you.